Hi there and welcome back to my channel. I'm Alexandra from Sesala DIY or Design, and this week's sewing idea is a Milkmaid dress. I fell in love with this pattern last year when I made my first Milkmaid dress, and I think it's a great pattern that looks good on many body shapes. In this video, I want to show you how you can make your pattern from a basic bodice block. So, let's see which are the steps. But first, what you need to make this dress. I had only 1.5 meters of fabric, but I recommend you to have at least 2 meters because I struggle a little to make this work. And it's better to have some extra fabric than to try to fit the pattern. 50 centimeters of lining or even less, and an invisible zipper. Now that we have what we need, we can move to the pattern part. As I told you, I will start with the basic bodice blocks. I made these blocks or sloppers for my measurements following the instructions I received in fashion school. You can make yours or buy a standard one if your measurements match those. I'll copy these blocks on a new sheet of paper and manipulate the pattern as you will see in the following graphics. I cut out the darts to be easier to manipulate the block. After I cut until the apex, I rotated the side part, closing the bust dart. And in the end, I got the front block part without the bust dart. I measured from the apex until under the bust to get the measurement I needed for the gather part. I doubled the value and I got the circle part as you can see in the first picture. I measured under the arm, in my case was around 2 centimeters, and I also established where I should cut the gather part, keeping the previous measurement in mind. In the end, I obtained 3 pattern pieces, as you can see in the last image. I took the third piece, the one that will be gathered. I eliminated the dart and added 6 centimeters to the fold line, and another 2 centimeters for the upper channel. This is how my front bodice looked without any seam allowances. The following pattern transformation was to the back of the bodice. I measured how long I wanted my back to be. I cut out the back part. Starting from the dart apex, I drew a straight line, and I separated the 2 pieces. I straightened the sides, I measured where I wanted my straps to be placed on the side piece, and I redrew the underarm seam. In the end, I got this pattern for the back of my bodice. Seam allowance is not included. Next, I will show you how I cut each piece. I use the same pattern for the lining. To make the skirt, I use the half circle skirt pattern. Here is the formula to calculate the radius, where C is the waistline and P has the standard value of 3.14. After I got the R value, I started to make my skirt. I folded my fabric in 2 and I measured from the corner the value of R. I drew the half circle of my waist and I measured the length of my skirt. You can make it as long as you prefer it. I marked the points on my skirt, I drew it and cut it. The last part of the pattern is the straps and the mini ruffled sleeves. Here are my measurements and the pattern that I use for it. You have to measure your own to make it work, especially for the straps. You can make them thinner or larger if you prefer it that way. Of course, the same goes for the sleeves too. Now it's time to go to the sewing part starting with the bodice. I pinned the front of the bodice, part 1 and 2 together. Face and lining. And I also pinned the back of the bodice, part 4 and 5 together. I sew it. I press open each seam. I pin the sides of the bodice, face and lining and sew it. And because I had a feeling that something wasn't quite okay with my bodice, it seemed too large, I tested on myself. And I realized that I shouldn't leave a 2 cm seam allowance since I'm used to work with a 1 cm seam allowance. As you imagine, yes, I only sew at 1 cm even though I gave it a 2 cm seam allowance when I cut it. So I had to remeasure and resew the bodice. I recommend you to test your bodice at this stage because it's easier to adjust it now. I took out the upper seam allowance and the one on the side, as you can see next. Don't forget to add the same modification to the lining too. I press open the seam allowance and trim the extra fabric. Now moving to the third piece of the front. I used the serger for my upper edge. And I made a hem on the sides. I sew it, and I made the upper channel where the elastic will be placed later. I gathered the bottom part by sewing 2 stitches at the maximum stitch length. And I attach it to the main bodice. I measure how much elastic I needed by measuring my upper chest. I placed the elastic through the channel. And sewed the edges. The next step was to sew the straps and the butterfly sleeves. I started by using the serger for the edge of the sleeves and making a hem. I pressed each hem . I made the 2 stitches at the maximum length at the bottom of the sleeves. And I also sewed the straps on one side. I pressed the seam on one side and I made an understitch. I gathered the sleeves and pinned them to the straps. I sew it. I close the straps with a basting stitch to fix it. And I sew it very close to the edge on the right side. The following step was to attach the sleeves and the skirt to the bodice. I place the straps to the front and the back of the bodice. And I sew it. After I attach the sleeves, I also attach the lining of the bodice. Pin them face to face. I sew it. I trim the edges where was necessary. I turn it over. And I made an understitch to keep the lining in place. I press the bodice. As you can see, the third piece of the front bodice doesn't have a lining. The following step was to attach the skirt. And I sew it at 1 centimeter from the waist. And use the serger to trim the fabric. And I use the serger one more time for the center back. Now we can attach the zipper. I remeasure everything to be sure that it aligned perfectly. And I pin the invisible zipper. I sew it on one side first with a regular zipper foot. I placed a pin on the zipper to be sure I will align it perfectly on the other side. And I pin the zipper on the other side of the dress. I sew it with the regular zipper foot the first time and the invisible zipper foot the second time. I check the zipper and I close the skirt. I also turn under the upper edge of the zipper, cut it, pin it, and sew it on both the edges and the skirt. I use the serger for the hem of the skirt, and I made a turn hem. I pressed everything. And now the dress. So here we have the Milkmaid dress. I just love how it turned out, and I think it's a great addition to my collection of dresses. What do you think? I hope that you enjoyed today's video, and if you have any questions or advice, as usual, my comment section is open. Don't forget to subscribe, give me a thumbs up, and share if you learned something new. Until next time, let's find inspiration.